Hello everyone, Snickety here. Last episode we took a look at a Cowboy Bebop game for the PlayStation 1 and I posed a question. Is the second Bebop game more in the spirit of the show? Well, strap yourselves in because we're about to find out.
Oh, fiddlesticks!
This one was released in 2005 for the PlayStation 2 and is titled Cowboy Bebop, Tsuioku no Serenade, which translates to Serenade of Reminiscence. Much like the PS1 game, it never saw a Western release. But it almost did. Bandai did plan to release the game in North America, and according to the English voice director, Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, parts were dubbed into English with the same voice actors from the show. I asked her to confirm this myself on Twitter, and apparently only the intro scene at the aquarium was recorded. Alas, the US release of the game was delayed multiple times until it was dropped altogether, so no English dub. It does have the original Japanese cast, for what it's worth, as did the PS1 game, but there's no English subtitles. Fortunately, there are videos on YouTube that have provided fan translations. All the subtitles you'll be seeing on screen are sourced from those videos.
Hi. お時間ですよ.
I wasn't able to play the game with subtitles myself, obviously, but it was nice to watch them after the fact. The game opens with a recreation of the classic tank intro. The music here is much more like the show, but there's also a huge downside to this. It is the music from the show. So the soundtrack just feels lazy, as if they just threw together the most memorable tracks from the anime and called it a day. Yoko Kanno did return to compose some original tracks though. For real this time. But it's only 3 tracks. Don't get me wrong, they're good tracks. It's just a shame they couldn't get her to compose an entire OST. Say what you will about the music from the PS1 game, but at least it wasn't all recycled from the show. Before we dive into the lengthy original story this game has, let's talk about how it plays, since this is the only part you can't experience by watching the cutscenes on YouTube. It's divided into multiple sections and attempts to capture every aspect of the show, as opposed to just the dogfight scenes. There's fighting sections where you stop and go up against multiple foes, very reminiscent of a Chopsaki or Bruce Lee flick. There are also shooting sections where you'll be able to take cover and dive around in slow motion like you're in a John Woo movie. There's some other stuff as well, but the shooting and fighting sections are the game's main focus. It's kind of silly that neither your player character or the enemies take out their guns during these fighting sections, but whatever. I'm willing to put this down to Chopsaki rules. You'll be able to punch and kick enemies and string together combos, something you're able to do quite fluidly when surrounded by enemies. It's clear they wanted a combat system that looks and feels cool, and they succeeded to some degree. But there's something about the punch and kick combo that brings it down. It feels sluggish. More importantly, it feels weak. The enemies have such huge bars of health that battles can drag on for a long time, and your attacks don't seem to do much damage. You can also grab enemies with the circle button, which is mostly useless except in very specific circumstances. The most important mechanic during these fighting sections is the tension meter, the yellow bar below your health. Holding R1 drains your tension meter, but while you have that button down, enemies won't be able to hit you. You'll automatically dodge incoming attacks. This is useful for when you want to focus on defense. It kind of reminds me of the stamina bar from the Souls games, as you'll frequently be backing off from the fight to allow it to recover. There's also an evasive roll that uses a big chunk of your tension meter. Unfortunately, like all things mapped to the thumbsticks, you'll often press it when you didn't mean to. But while holding down R1 will keep you safe, pressing it at the right time will execute a counter. Counters are really awesome and you'll feel like a badass every time you hit one. You have to tap the button just as someone is taking a swing at you. It takes a bit of practice. These counters aren't just for show, however. They're actually your most effective offense. A successful counter will kill most enemies instantly, and anyone who happens to be around. So what we have here is regular attacks that do little damage, and a counter that does way too much damage. Do you know what this means, Sachi?
You must become shapeless, like water.
Say what?
Water can drip and it can crash. This game teaches you to employ your mind and be like water. If you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. Be water, my friend.
No, Sachi. It means the only attack worth using are the counters. Actually, you might also be right. I have no idea what you said. I realised that your regular attacks are only really useful for finishing off an enemy when they're low on health. It's still a safer way of dealing damage, as you can still very easily screw up a counter. But later on in the game, if you aren't dishing out counters left and right, you'll die. A lot. Sachi, play me some sweet 80s montage music while I master the counter.
Oh, I'll get the mixtape.
Nobody told you that you'd face the truth alone, but you got the power to begin. Let yourself wander, let your spirit find the way, reach for the power from within. You got no reason to let people keep you down. Stand up and fight for what you are. 'Cause your biggest challenge is the one that lies within yourself. Know what you're fighting for. Hold on to the vision in your eyes. Keep the fire burning bright, like you make them realize. Only with power can you rise. Hold on to that vision in your eyes. The tape is messed up.
That isn't helping, Spike. It's not?
Once you become a black belted master of the counter in Cowboy Bebop, there becomes no reason to use any other attack. But this also totally ruins the gameplay, boiling every encounter down to a one-hit kill. It looks awesome, it feels awesome, but it's just boring. Stuff based on quick reactions are, of course, good. They reward skilled gameplay. But when they become the only gameplay, that's just a stupid combat system. It'd be like if every Street Fighter match had to be won with a Daigo parry. Those were the rules, or else the match just goes on forever. Now to be fair, I have seen other gameplay where players have made effective use of the combos, but I was never able to do this myself. And why should I, when the counters are way better? Getting good at the counters is way easier than getting good at the combos too, so I'm not going to throw the game a bone here. There are other attacks you can use, such as the cool and hot special moves. There's 2 bars below your health. The blue one is your cool meter, and the red one is your hot meter. You can build the cool meter by doing well at the game, and you build the hot meter by completely and utterly sucking. Needless to say, I more often built up the latter. The cool special attack has a wide range and is quite useful, but the hot attack is total trash. It only goes in the one direction, and usually misses anything you try to direct it at. You're probably better off not even using it. Unfortunately, using counters builds an either bar, and as we've already established, counters are kind of my thing in this game. That's everything worth mentioning about the combat really. There's a super special you get when one of your bars fills all the way, but I never managed to do that. Oh, and sometimes Spike gets to use a broom like he did in the movie. Let's move on to the shooting sections. You can hide behind cover and wait for your opportunity to shoot back. For some strange reason, all of your bullets explode on impact and have some serious stopping power. Getting shot will knock you down for a couple seconds. Realistic perhaps, but it doesn't really work well in the video game. Anyway, you can also press circle to do a slow motion dive and shoot multiple enemies at the same time. It's kind of cool. These sections aren't too bad, but they are hindered by some bad design choices. You're unable to turn your character too far to the left and right, as if Spike is some sort of gun turret with limited rotation. You're also not allowed to reload and move at the same time. These weird restrictions really make these parts feel stiff and lifeless. For the most part, there's segregation between the fighting and shooting sections, but every now and then you can switch between them. It's odd. Why would your character not use a gun if they could? This can be seen during one of the game's boss fights. You have to shoot the signs to make her fall down and then attack her when she's dazed on the ground. You can only hurt her with melee attacks for some dumb reason. The transition between the two gameplay styles isn't smooth at all. so it's easy to see why they kept them separate. You've probably noticed by now that you're not restricted to playing as just Spike Spiegel. There's also Faye Valentine and Jet Black. Spike is the good all-rounder, Jet deals a lot of damage but is slow, and Faye does the least amount of damage but is the quickest. Not that any of these differences matter, since all of their counters are insta-kills, and I'm gonna stop hammering on about that now. Now that we've covered the majority of the gameplay, let's take a look at the game as a whole, from beginning to end. Be aware that I'll be spoiling the entire story in this next segment. That is to say the story of the game, not the anime. I figured most people watching this video probably won't be able to play it anyway, so I'll try to condense the entire experience down so you're not missing out.
This is like the last episode of Cowboy Bebop!
It certainly is. The game starts with a gang chasing after a bounty at an aquarium. It goes about as well as you'd expect. Spike does one of those anime punches where the background goes all abstract with speed lines. Something the actual anime never did, but I digress. After a lengthy tutorial section, we get to the game's first puzzle. A door with a password. There's quite a few of these scattered throughout the game, and the only way to solve them is by looking around for clues. You find these suspicious spots that you can take a closer look at. These parts aren't very good because of how little detail they give you. Just keep hammering on the X button until you find something.
Watson, get in here! I've discovered a clue!
After the introduction mission, Spike comes across an old song, named Diamonds by Priscilla.
この曲、どこかで
The significance of which doesn't become clear until later on. We arrive aboard the Bebop, and this game's adherence to the source material becomes clear. It has the same reoccurring gag of the crew being in perpetual poverty, and the banter between the characters is on point.
できんのか稼げんのかそこで黙るな
Similar to the show, there's an episodic nature to the narrative with an overarching plot. This episodic format is contained to the first third of the game or so. It's just the Bebop crew going after eccentric bounty heads. There's nothing too noteworthy here besides some wacky villains. For the sake of brevity, I'll be sticking to the main plot. Later on, the gang hears about the rumour of Captain H's treasure. Captain H was a space pirate who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor half a century ago. Apparently he was so popular he had his own anime. I'm gonna nitpick this for a second, because this bothered me. I know we have cartoons about Robin Hood, but that's more folklore, and is certainly older than 50 years. In the context of this game, this is like if they made a cartoon out of DB Cooper. Yeah, the kids will love that. Actually, they probably would. Maybe I'm thinking too much about what is an obvious Captain Harlock reference. But anyway, Faye gets excited about finding Captain H's pirate treasure, and tries to get the others to go looking for it. Later, Spike catches up with a bounty head named Steve, a music producer who is also after Captain H's treasure. For some reason, he assumes Spike is also a music producer, and tells him about said treasure, which he believes to be an unpublished song by the singer Priscilla. And then this game's original characters are introduced. A pair of young bounty hunters who try to kill Spike when they mistake him for a bounty head. What is with all the odd assumptions in this story? Despite the attempted murder of a giant machine gun, Jet is very apologetic about the whole misunderstanding, for some reason. This part of the game is pretty damn awesome. You have to kick these mines back at Ken while using the crates to avoid getting shot by Bianca from above. It's really creatively designed and fun, something a lot of this game is lacking, sadly. Speaking of which, now we get to the ship sections, and these are just a chore to get through. The ship is on rails and you have minimal control over it. You can move the ship slightly to avoid crashing into things. There's also a boost which you'll need since these sections are on a time limit. The time can get so strict later on that you'll need to hold down the boost button through the entire course. You get shot at by enemies and you can fire back, but be very wary of your ammo. You only get about 5 or 6 shots, so make them count. If you run out, well, your only option is to dodge bullets, in addition to the environmental hazards. These sections boil down to simple memorization at the end of the day. Fortunately, they're few and far between, so they're not too bad. If I had to compare this to the gameplay from the PS1 game, I'd probably go with the PS1 game. That had unlimited ammo and you had a third-person view of your ship, not to mention actual control. There's a scene with Jet and a woman named Ellen at a bar. They talk about a man named Ronald, a cop Jet used to work with before he was killed in the line of duty by terrorists. Keep this guy Ronald in mind because he later turns up as the game's villain. Nothing says antagonist more than a man named Ronald.
危険を察知する能力は人一倍らしいな気に入らないな
Next we have a stage with Spike and Bianca being pursued by goons on a train. This part in particular annoyed me, as it has a shooting section with no cover whatsoever. The shooting in this game doesn't work at all unless you have some cover. And as I said in my Bullet Witch review, cover-based shooting always sucks. And this was made before cover-based shooters became at the very least functional. But getting back into things, we've reached what is possibly the hardest part in the entire game. That's quite impressive considering this game is made up of various overly difficult sections. Spike jumps onto the roof of this train and you have to get to the other side, all while avoiding the stuff coming at you at high speed. It sounds simple enough, but everything is a one-hit kill and your reaction time has to be like greased lightning. I must have died about 50 times trying this. And every time you do, you have to sit through the same long, boring cutscene. I almost rage quit the game during this part. I'm still surprised I didn't. I honestly would have if I didn't already promise this video. Just look at this madness.
Wipe yourself off, man. You dead.
There is no margin for error. You have to jump between the carriages too, which leaves you vulnerable for a second. You have 3 hazards to worry about here. The left, the right and the above. You can duck below the one that comes from above, but with the left and the right, your only option is to run to the other side. Make sure you don't run too far in either direction though. If you do, you won't have enough time to run to the other side. There's also enemies, but it's best just to ignore those.
I'm the guy with the plan, because I'm smarter. Yeah? Well, I'm taller.
Something you might have noticed is that Spike sometimes blocks your view of what's ahead. This killed me quite a few times as well. What demented Japanese programmer came up with this? You can see me finally doing it here. Anyway, let us forget about this fresh hell and move on with the game. Kent starts getting chased by goons because they think he knows where Captain H's treasure is. And for good reason. Captain H was Kent and Bianca's grandfather. Faye tries to keep him out of harm's way since she's also looking for the treasure. But the two end up getting imprisoned by none other than Ronald, the dead man himself. Jet then confronts Ellen and asks if it's really possible that Ronald died all those years ago. Turns out his ship was just lost in hyperspace. Dead, lost in hyperspace, what's the difference? And then Jet fights some goons chasing after Steve. Can you imagine getting punched by Jet? The dude's got arms like tree trunks. Quick time events. This game has a lot of those, some of which are downright evil, as we'll see later on. This one just amuses me though. A ceiling fan very slowly falling on Jet. Okay, we're out of the bar and... oh god damn it! Anyway, Faye and Kent escape from prison using the oldest trick in the book, and we get to a stage that is quite annoying thanks to Kent. Kent can fight on his own, but his AI is just hopeless. Not only do you have to keep yourself from dying, but that little twerp too. This game seems to be aware of how annoying this is, as health kits appear much more often, and the AI wastes no time stealing it. That also has the downside of you yourself never having a chance to heal. Oh god damn it, Kent, you son of a bitch!
Please go easy on him, Snickety. Falling is unavoidable sometimes.
You can actually punch Kent yourself, but it doesn't decrease his life bar, which is good since he's constantly in the way. Okay, so I've made it clear that I'm not really a fan of this stage, but you haven't even seen the worst it has to offer. There's stealth sections. Bad ones. You have to tiptoe along the floor or else the enemies will hear you and it's game over. I don't know about you, but I absolutely hate this in video games. You're so used to holding the joystick all the way down, holding it only halfway is really hard. If your thumb has so much as a twitch, Faye will run and it's game over. This is one of those things that should not be challenging in a game. Trying to avoid getting shot in a gun battle, that's meant to be challenging, because it would be in real life. You can make a mistake and end up with a bullet in your chest. That is a very real danger. Getting spotted by guards in a stealth game is also a real danger. But do you know what isn't? Walking slowly. I don't know about you, but that's not something I struggle with. I do it every night when I need to take a piss at 2 AM. But this has been a long rant to point out something so simple as walking should not be hard. Anyway, the next part of this section has you sneaking up to enemies and taking them out of a well-placed judo chop. If you're spotted, it's game over. Despite the fact that we fought through larger waves of enemies previously. A good way to describe this would be tedious. God damn it, Kent, you've died again. The next room confused me. You have to solve a puzzle by pushing these crates. I thought there was some way of pushing them to create a pathway to the door, but all you have to do was destroy them with a kick. Some of these crates can be destroyed, others can't. Why? Who knows. But the next part is one of the many chase sequences this game has. These are pretty fun, but it can be confusing where you're meant to go at times. Notice a pattern with this game. Everything is obfuscated. So it turns out Faye and Ken are located on the island where Captain H's treasure is supposedly buried. Hence all the tight security. In the next scene we find out that the singer Priscilla is actually Bianca's grandmother, meaning she and Captain H were a couple at one point. Spike then acts as a distraction for Bianca to escape, and we get this cool sniper sequence. This stage is pretty standard really. Towards the end you have to kick these grenades at the guy throwing them, which is kind of difficult. You really have to get lucky with that kick. It doesn't help that you're constantly being attacked by enemies either. The checkpoint placements really leave something to be desired in this game. Sometimes you'll have to replay a lot of the same rooms again if you die. Sometimes you don't. It's very inconsistent. Here, if you die, you have to go through this pointless room again. Why not start me where the danger is? Are you trying to waste my time? At one point, you have to defend Bianca from above in an FPS section. It's ridiculously easy. There's only one other part like this in the entire game, and it's also far too easy, which is very out of character for this game. Spike faces off against Ronald for the first time, and it's revealed that explosives have been placed on the Bebop. Cut to jet, and we control a hovercraft, in a pretty tedious filler sequence. It's not bad, it's just kind of boring. But you want to know what the worst thing about it is? Right at the end, there's a quick time event. Now, I wasn't expecting this on my first try, so I just set the pad down. Only to be greeted by a game over screen, and then you have to do the entire thing again. It's like one big troll. Anyway, jet lands on the Bebop and you have to locate all the bombs. The interesting thing about this part is that you get to explore a 3D recreation of the Bebop. It's exciting actually being able to look around this location that you only ever saw parts of. It reminded me of that feeling of exploring the Simpsons house in that hit and run game when I was a kid. You have to be really careful though, because I got lost on this stage for over an hour looking for all the bombs. Faye gets in contact with the Bebop and tells him about the island with Captain H's treasure. Spike naturally makes his way there, while the Bebop is being attacked by ships. I have no idea what Jet does to fend off these ships single-handedly, because it's never shown, nor is it ever mentioned again. So I guess it was a drive-by? This narrative has a lot of faith in Jet. I can't really blame it. Dude is hard as nails. Spike arrives at the island and starts laying waste to the soldiers stationed there. It's kind of stupid how many of them there actually are, but whatever. There are certain areas where the only way to advance is to defeat the purple enemy on your radar. They're usually throwing grenades. If you don't beat them, enemies will keep spawning indefinitely. How are you meant to know this? I can only assume the game tells you at some point. But what in-universe reason could there be for this? Are the purple dots radioing for reinforcements or something? We may never know or care. Spike finds Steve at Priscilla's grave before he's shot and killed by an airship.
Steve!
No, not Steve!
The pilot is after the bounty on Spike's head, which is the reason you get attacked so much in this game, by the way. Can you put a bounty on someone's head if they haven't broken the law? Can I suddenly say, hey, there's a 3 million Wulong bounty on Sachi's head? I mean, I suppose it's not a legal contract, but that just makes this dude a hitman, not a bounty hunter. At any rate, Steve's final wish is to listen to Priscilla's unreleased song at least once. Luckily, Spike had already gotten the song from Bianca's holographic picture frame earlier, so he lets him listen. The gang reunites and they run into a familiar face. Ellen, Ronald's lover from the bar. She tells them that Ronald and his men were unable to find the treasure on the island. It wouldn't be in the spirit of Cowboy Bebop if they got rich now, would it? We once again come face to face with Ronald and his full plan is revealed. He spread the rumour about the treasure to lure bounty heads to the island, where he plans to blow the place up and get rid of them once and for all. His rationale? To make the place safer for cops. He also hates bounty hunters, which is why he plans to kill them too. This is an extraordinarily stupid plan. Did Ronald actually expect every bounty head in Solar System to chase after a treasure that may or may not exist, and all be on the island when the explosives go off? I like this scene here because you get to see Bianca and Faye butt heads.
うるさいバカ女バカとは何よバカだからバカって言ったのよ
Anyway, after some gameplay with Spike, we finally reach Ronald for the final battle. Oh wait, he escapes. And the game is still going for some reason. After a long pursuit, Spike lands on Ronald's ship where the real climax begins. The theme song plays for this entire level, which is pretty cool until you realise it's only 90 seconds long and on a loop. It's at this point where the combat would become much harder if I wasn't well trained in the one-hit kill counter. But you get to a stupidly hard part where you have no cover and you have to take out these guys with shields. You have a split-second window where they're not behind their shields and not shooting at you. This is a good place to make use of the first rule of combat.
Shoot them before they shoot you.
Now we get to an absolutely evil part of the game. You have to carefully traverse this field of lasers, all while fighting wave after wave of goons.
Goons!
Who?
Hired goons!
It's pretty tough, and it'll take you a good while. But there's nothing better than that sweet taste of They did it again! They put a QuickTime event at the end of a long sequence. You have no way of knowing it's there, so you will fail this at least once, and go all the way back to the beginning. The first time this happened, I let out a cry of despair. We've all been there at one point. And then it happened the second time because I pressed the wrong button. Or maybe I was too slow, who knows? So at this point, I said fuck it. I handed the controller over to Sachiko, who did the rest of the game for me. Well, Sachiko, did you have fun?
Well,
Don't answer that. No, of course you didn't. Next we get to a boss fight with this robot dude with nunchuck arms. You're unable to hit him directly at all. What you have to do is wait for him to leave himself open and then grab him. That's right, this is one of the few times you have to use a circle grab. Now you have to smash him into this electric machinery. There's a big problem with this boss. Spike misses his grab half the time, leaving you open to an ass whooping. But anyway, Sachi eventually persevered. Good going, Sachi.
thanks!
And got us to the final boss, Ronald, who is pure insanity. We get a speech about dream and reality, and how Ronald must wake up from his dream. It's all very similar to the final confrontation with Vincent from the movie. This is not a boss you should take lightly. You have two means of dealing damage here. You can wait for him to miss a kick and combo him from behind, or you can counter him. Good luck doing the latter with any kind of consistency, by the way. I couldn't even get close, and by the end of this game, I was countering like the best of them. The thing that sucks about this boss is that you'll be constantly draining the tension gauge, waiting for the right moment. Most of the fight is you running away from him, waiting for the thing to recharge.
Stay away! Don't come near! No! Oh, fiddlesticks! I died again!
Sachi managed to beat Ronald at this point. Good job, Sachi.
Thank you!
So I took the controller from her. I was planning on stealing the victory for myself, if I'm honest. But then this happened. The dude has a phase 2. Now he's even harder to hit. If I die here, I'm gonna have to do the first phase again, aren't I? This time I rage quit for real. This game was giving me a migraine, so I just looked up the ending online. Ronald is defeated and Bianca lets Spike keep the song. This turns out to be their only reward from the game's adventure, as the Bebop crew still don't have a Wulong to their names. The end. I want to talk more about the story to this game, as it's the only worthwhile thing about it. The gameplay is not good at all. In fact, it's a chore that gets in the way of a half-decent story. The story presented in this game isn't anything as good as the best episodes of the show, but it's fine. The new characters, Bianca and Ken, are pretty cool. The fact that they're so young makes for good contrast next to the older, more jaded cast we know and love. In fact, they kind of act as a replacement for Ed in that regard, since she isn't in much of this game. She shows up a couple times, but the story gives her nothing to do. My biggest complaint with the narrative has to do with Ronald's dumb plan and motivations. They make zero sense. The writing tries to be as smart as the show and movie, but it just falls flat. It's not a terrible episode of Cowboy Bebop, but it is sure attached to a terrible game. If you're like me and you simply must have more Bebop, I still can't recommend this. Just watch the cutscenes on YouTube. So I hope you've enjoyed this exploration of the only 2 video games based on Cowboy Bebop, an anime classic to remember. I've been thinking about which one I prefer, and I'm gonna have to go with the PS1 game. It was short and had some awesome music. The PS2 game is long, frustrating, and repetitive. However, the PS2 game does do a better job at capturing the feel of the show, but I simply found the first game to be more fun, and that's more important for a video game. But I still don't recommend either of them. Play a good game, and not something that's based on a beloved anime. So for now, this is goodbye.
See ya!
Bang.
"愛してたと嘆くにはあまりにも